lectures from the first unit, please do that. I would assume you did, but just in case if you didn't, please do that because Blackboard is already telling me it's full. Our class is full. I'm like, oh, great. So I probably will end up having to delete unit 1. Okay? So when you get ready to study for your final, they will not be on Blackboard, okay? So hopefully you have already downloaded it and written your own notes, right? So it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, good. Your test. All right. First of all, last week, right before your test, I was feeling like super generous and I was like, I'm gonna give them 2 extra credit points questions and this is gonna be wonderful. I didn't proof them. I literally put them in like 10 minutes before I came up here. Guess what? There's errors on both of them. Okay? So if you chose one of the correct of those 2 answers, you would have gotten points. Okay? And so I believe, I don't even remember, I think the first one was, I wrote 9-year-old, I meant to write 8-year-old, what the heart rate should have been. So a 9-year-old is actually considered an adult. So the range was between 60 and 100. So there were 2 correct answers. Okay? The other question was a respiration rate. And again, there was 2 correct answers for it. It should have been between 25 and 50, and there was 2 answers. There was 28 and 48, if I remember correctly. So both of those, if you had missed one of those, you got credit. I encourage you guys to come to my office. I know sometimes you have to wait to talk to me, but I think it's very valid. I would caution you in the sense of if your expectation is to come to the office and talk to me about your class or your grade, and you want to try to argue your rationale or what you think is right, and then I'm going to give you points back, that's not going to occur, okay? Come to the office with the expectation that you want to learn more, like why you're missing questions, whether it's the way you're studying, maybe it's the way that you're reading the question, something like that, okay? Occasionally, though, I do make errors, right? I am human. I'm writing all these test questions from scratch, and it came to my attention yesterday that one of my questions is wrong. So if you look at your grade and it went up, it is because I threw out one of the questions, okay? I'm not going to go over every question in the test in class because, again, we just don't have time for that. But I'm going to read this question so you know. If I can find it, hold on. It was a PTA student has noted that their cardiac patient has a slightly higher heart rate than normal. Which of the following factors could have been the cause? A was medication, B would have been the patient is a female, C was cool temperature in the hospital room, or D was all the above. Medication is absolutely correct. Patient is a female is actually correct as well, but the room should have been hotter, okay? So no matter what you put, you got 2 points. So if you had gotten it correct and you put D for my error, you would have already gotten the 2 points, but let's say you chose, I don't know, something else, you got 2 points yesterday, okay? I am embarrassed, but I'm a human and I am going to be fair always, so you will be fair. I will always be fair to you guys. I won't take points from you, but I want to caution you guys because I'm slightly concerned. If you look at my track record, and I'm not telling you this to brag, but I want you to remember this. Last semester I wrote 450 test questions, and I had 3 wrong for the whole semester. So that's like less than 1%, right? So I am concerned though that the first test I made 3 errors. So you're gonna sit in the next test and say, Christy wrote this wrong. I don't want you guys to come away with that mentality, okay? Be very cautious. We are preparing you for your boards, right? You're getting questions from us that are very detailed. You need to think clinically. So the correct answer is in front of you guys, okay? So don't sit there during the test and say, I think she wrote this question wrong, okay? I want you to always in the back of your mind be prepared for your boards and thinking the right answer is one of these 4, okay? So, all right, any questions about that? All right. Then yesterday in lab 2, oh yes,
I
sorry.
have to say that it's very sweet that you're addressing it and not brushing it off, and I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. I am embarrassed, but I'm also human, right? And so we have to kind of give each other grace, right? And so I'm not going to ever rob you guys of points, okay? So that is never my intention. It was brought to my knowledge yesterday, and then I sat there and talked through it, and then I was like, later I thought of it again, and I pulled up my slide again from where I got the test question, and I was like, it's wrong. So you guys are gonna get points for it, okay? And I appreciate your feedback. Anyway, and then yesterday in lab, and I just wanna make sure we're addressing this all together, because I don't wanna miss it and tell one lab and not tell the rest, whatever. You need a 69.5 on your test average, right? To be able to take the final in the class.
69 or 79?
69. So I'm gonna write it down, because I agree. We did this whole math thing yesterday. 69.5 is the, you need, this is what you need
So that's the minimum.
for the test average. That gets you to your final, right? For your final kilometer, right? So think about the reasoning for this, right? If you have a 69.5, it's gonna round to 70, right? That's a C. Then when you take your final, we expect that last 25% would raise you to a B, right? So you're gonna get that B, right? That's what's gonna happen, right? Everybody's gonna say yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're below this, it is really hard to be able to make it to the B. Okay? And so that is one of the reasons for this, including other reasons, but that's why. Okay? For the class, right? 79.5. Okay? That's gonna be your class all said and done, right? Also your practicals have to be averaged at 79.5. Alright? Alright, so has everybody got that?
Is this within all the classes or is this just your class?
I am only speaking for my class. Okay? I'm only speaking for my class. I don't want to say that I'm confident in all the other classes, but I know for mine it is. Okay? And then, oh gosh, there was something else about this. Yeah. That's all. 79.5 is what you gotta have. Oh, I know what I'm doing. So, let's say you made less than a 69.5 on this first test, and you, in your head, you are playing this recording that says, oh my God, I gotta make a higher score. Well, do you? Yes. But is it all fail and gloom and it's over? No, right? Because you're gonna have 4 tests in this class, right? So, I'm again cautioning y'all about the way you speak to yourselves, and I don't want to hear you saying negative things to yourselves, right? So if you made below a 69, let's say you made a 60, that's okay. I'm not saying anybody did. I'm just saying if you made a 60, you just know that you need to make a higher grade, right, on the next one to be able to offset it and get an average, okay? So you can still do that. We have plenty of time left. You have time to study, right? So you guys can do this. All right, positive thinking. Okay, now we're gonna start. Are there any questions? And did y'all get to hear about your fun lab today?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Our wheelchairs
All
are
right,
going
so
up the
this is
stairs,
not the most
downstairs.
exciting topic, but it is an important topic. Okay? The American with Disability Act, it is very important. It's from Chapter 13. So the American Disability Act was signed in 1990. It got revised in 2008. It provides enforcement and standards that ban discrimination based on a disability. ADA was designed to extend civil rights for people that have disabilities. And it is in the private sector for employment as well, okay? So we got some definitions. Disability is defined in your book as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that is substantially limiting one or more of major life activities. So what are major life activities? Those are communication, working, walking, standing, lifting, bending, carrying oneself, breathing, learning, seeing, hearing, speaking, reading, thinking, sleeping, concentrating, eating, and performing a manual task. It covers a lot, you guys. Okay. A physical or mental impairment. An individual must have a physical or mental impairment. Impairment means that they have a physiological disorder or condition. It could be a cosmetic disfiguration. It could be a loss of a limb, musculoskeletal. Your book even says special sense organs, respiration, speaking organs, and cardiovascular, lymphatic, skin, and endocrine. Okay? So again, ADA really is going to cover a lot of things. Okay? Reasonable accommodations, making a modification at a job site or workplace that will enable persons with disability to be able to easily perform the specific job. That is considered a reasonable accommodation. Undue burden means an action necessary to provide a reasonable accommodation that would cause the employer significant difficulty or expenses. So remember for this, it's really factors and hardships. So maybe the size of the business or the number of employees may cause us to not be able to do something. We'll talk later about what they consider a true undue burden, okay, for an employer. Some examples of reasonable accommodations are going to be like adjusting their workspace, restructuring a job, or adjusting their work schedule to be able to meet somebody's needs. Qualified individuals with a disability. This is a person who can perform an essential function, so the work job, the task, with or without a benefit of reasonable accommodations. Okay. And then covered entities. This is an employer or employment agency or labor organization, joint labor management organization, state and local government are all things that are covered under this. So basically everybody. The only people, we'll talk about it later, is a business that is very small, may be able to consider, it might be a undue burden for them, okay? But we'll talk about it here in a minute. So general aspects of the American with Disability Act, there's 4 titles. We're gonna talk about each one of them. It includes workplace accommodations, full and equal access to services. So this is out in the community as well, in like hotels, restaurants, and in the private sector must comply based on employment numbers. Okay, so the amended American Disability Act states that all private sector employers who employ more than 15 people for at least 20 weeks in a calendar year, and industries affected with 25 or more employees in the same amount of time, that 20 week, are required to comply with this. Okay, so because of the requirements of Title III related to accessibility of public accommodations in most commercial facilities, employers and business owners and their agencies are affected even if they employ less than 15. So what that means basically is if your facility is meeting the needs of like the community, you still have to have a way for a handicap or wheelchair to be able to enter your facility. Even if you employ less than 15 people, you might not have to meet it for your employee, but you're gonna have to meet it for the public. Okay, so most of the time you can't get around accommodations. So like I said, there's 4 titles. Title 1 is employment. Title 2 is public services. Title 3 is public accommodations. Number 4 is telecommunication. And 5 is miscellaneous. But basically, it's the first 4. So Title 1 prohibits an employer from discriminating against a qualified individual with a disability on the basis of that disability alone. An employer could be considered to have discriminated against a qualified person with a disability if the employer does not make reasonable accommodations. The employee must request the accommodations and may suggest appropriate things. The employer is allowed to review them and propose different things, and select one that's most easy for them to accommodate and do undue hardship for their business. Okay, so just because the wheelchair-bound person wants their desk in a certain location doesn't mean you have to provide it in that location as long as you're providing them with a desk that they can reach. Does that make sense? That's the difference. As of March 15th of 2011, animals are considered a reasonable accommodation. Title 2 and Title 3, only dogs are considered service animals. Okay? There are only 2 questions permitted when a person enters a public facility or public place with accommodations of a service animal. So what are those 2 questions? Those are, is the animal required because of the disability? And number 2 is what work or task is the animal trained to perform? So you're not allowed to ask if the patient is disabled. Okay? You cannot ask that. You're not allowed to request documentation to prove that the animal is a service animal. Okay? And you cannot require them to demonstrate the task. So you can't say the dog, show me that the dog does this. Okay? So, yes.
Can you repeat what the second question
Yes, I'm
was?
going to name them both 2 again. Okay, so there's 2 questions that they're allowed to ask. 2, is the animal required because of a disability? So that's like a yes or no, right? They're not allowed to ask what the disability is, anything else. Yes.
I don't know like how long ago this was amended, but miniature horses are also considered service animals.
I know, I really struggled with putting this on my slide. Like literally even last night was like, I don't feel like this is correct, but this is what your book says.
Okay, so for the test, we're going off of.
For the test, I would know 2 questions that you might get asked.
Okay.
I'm not gonna ask what the service animal is. Okay? So, but per your book, they say only dogs. But I've heard a lot of things I mean, somebody took a peacock on the airplane, remember that, like a while back, and said that was their service animal? So, I mean, okay, we're digressing. 2 questions. Is the animal required because of the disability? And what work or task has the animal been trained to perform? Can you ask them to perform it?
No.
No. All right. Thank you for reminding me of that, Matt. All right, Title 3 is designed to protect persons with disability on the basis of their disability from being discriminated related to full or equal access to services, facilities, accommodations, goals, privileges, and advantages on any place in public accommodation by a person whose own lease or operating the site, place, facility is classified as a public accommodations. Oh my gosh. So, the following, the Title III usually requires removal, modifications, alterations of structures or barriers when and changes can be made reasonably, okay? So what are we talking about with Title III? This is why, this is the title that you need to install a ramp, right? So that the patient can get in to the facility, okay? This is widen a doorway so that, the client can get down the hallway, right? That's what this is about, having grab bars in a bathroom, okay? That is what this Title III is about. The other thing is a restaurant, their menu, they might, if the person is maybe nonverbal, you might have to say, okay, our accommodation would be giving them a piece of paper and a pen. Or we are willing to read our menu to them if they needed that, okay? So that would be considered reasonable accommodation, okay? That would fall under Title III.
Some restaurants have braille menus too.
Correct. Yep. Compliance and implementation of regulations. Right. The employer must be aware of the restrictions associated with the limits imposed on pre-employment, and inquiring that from an applicant, okay? An applicant can be asked whether he or she can do the job, like a feature of the job or a function, but you're not allowed to ask more detailed questions than that. So before making an offer, or during the application phase of the employment process, impairment-related questions, medical history information, and medical exams are prohibited under the ADA, okay? Unless they are specified for the job-related task. So during the interview, you can't ask physical characteristics, or their present health. You can't talk to them about that. So what happens is, in the private sector, like for jobs, a company should determine the function of the job, meaning like what they need to be able to do physically, mentally. They should have requirements, right? Job description already, and specific training and education certifications. So that is what you're allowed to ask, okay? You're allowed to relate it to their last job. But you can't ask them currently how their health is, okay? The interviewer is permitted to ask the applicant the duties that were performed in their previous job, like I just said, but you're not allowed to ask any questions about their current health or their psychiatric history. Those are all prohibited. Medical exams or evaluations are permitted if they are performed after an offer of employment is given. Okay? Pre-employment testing, like illegal drugs use, is permitted as well. A person who has successfully satisfied the completed a drug or alcohol rehab program, or is enrolled in such program, is actually protected under the ADA. So what's a reasonable accommodations for an employee, for employees? When a person with an impairment is hired and the impairment is made known, the employer should be prepared to address the need of a reasonable accommodation and provide better opportunity for the employee for the job, right? The employer must consider the requirements for accessibility contained in Title II. Those are a little different than Title I, all right? So the employer does not have to make accommodations, but the accommodations would fundamentally alter the operations of the business. So I'm gonna say that one more time. The employer does not have to make the accommodations if it will structurally or fundamentally change or alter the operations of the business. So you can't come in and demand some outrageous thing, right? And it would change the way they operate. So, I'm trying to think of one just off the top of my head. If you were in a wheelchair and you came in and you said, I want to work on this assembly line, you can't ask them to change the whole way the assembly line is working. That would be considered undue burden for them. And their product may not be able to be produced correctly, right? But if you're asking for them to modify the height of something so that you could reach it, that would not be considered an undue burden. Okay, that's the difference here. Must be completed even if expenses, so the business has to complete these tasks, even if it's expensive, even if it adjusts the workstation. Those can't be the excuses. So you can't just say, well, this costs a lot of money, so we didn't do it. Okay? You have to still, you still have to follow the ADA requirements. Okay? Only if the fundamental alteration of the business would be changed. So our production of our, I don't know, whatever we made on our production line would be changed because of this. That's the only reason the employer can say that. Okay. So now we have people that audit this, okay? So there are consultation companies that you can come in and they will literally have a team that come in. They can be a healthcare worker. So why you might work, I've actually known one or two therapists that this is what they go out and help. I actually have a friend who's a lawyer. There's a whole team of them that they go out. They have a PT, they have a lawyer, they have a patient in a wheelchair, and then they have a structural engineer person as well. And they're a team. They go out and audit places, okay? So you gotta make sure that they look at like ramps, the slopes, the rise, the doorways, signage, all this whole list has to be addressed. Equipment, seating, the setup, the pathway, the parking lot is huge, is one of the ones that usually get missed the most, where the parking is, whether there's alarms, signs. 80% of the cost for most facilities is less than $1,000, okay? So most facilities can make adjustments to meet the needs of the ADA requirement for less than $1,000. So what do these teams do? They go out, they educate, they perform on-job analysis, perform on-site environmental evaluations, like I just kind of talked about, help develop functional-based job descriptions. Sometimes the client hasn't made those job descriptions that they should have done before they even did the hiring process, so you help them do that. And then advise them on how to remove barriers, perform physical capacity testing. So that would go back to that job analysis too. So I've actually, at one of the facilities I work, they would have the client would send us a person that was applying for the job, and we would make them go through a test to see if they could do certain things, okay? And that had to do with the consultation part of this, okay? So, help develop policies and procedures. That's what this team would end up helping with, okay? Is this their niche? This is what they want to do? Hold on one second. You never know.
A PTA could do this, not a PT.
Yes. Yep. So, all right, Title III. This is the public accommodations. So, existing facilities that are classified as public will need to have public accommodations and are required to for their structures, right? So for their buildings, they have to accommodate for the public to come to, all right? So Sam's Club has to adhere to our ADA requirements. There's actually tax deductions. IRS will give them a tax credit if they need to change things in order to help too. So what are those barriers that we're going to talk to them about if we're part of this team? We're going to talk to them about curb cutouts, repositioning shelves, maybe moving furniture, repositioning like the phones or the desk setup, the height of the desk, rearranging, the bathrooms as well, like toilets, making sure there's space in front of the toilet, and it's in the next slide, how much room you need between your toilets. Removing carpet sometimes as well, but making sure you have grab bars and those things as well. That's the main purpose and what we're removing barriers are, okay? So if the removal of existing, architectural barriers is not readily achievable, the facility, or establishment is entitled to must provide its goods or services through an alternate method. So a good example of this is a pharmacy. If the person can't walk into the pharmacy, they have a drive-through, right? So that's what I think of when I think of this one, is you might have to have drive-through service, okay? That's how they get around that. So for assessing the environment, there's three primary environments to be evaluated. You have to look at the patient's, or the person's residence. Sorry, I call everybody a patient. Sorry, y'all. You look at your person's residence, their employment, and the community, right? So we're gonna look at all those things we just talked about, the doorways, relocating like light fixtures, where they turn it on and off. All those things have to be addressed in all three of these locations. So healthcare workers, we go in and talk to them. There are universal designs now, and this is coming up on the next slide, of what is considered the norm and what they should be so that they meet the ADA requirements, okay? And so that's what we would include for these three locations. Again, the team, what they're doing during the assessment process, they're gonna do interviews, they're gonna go to the site. They will literally record it all, write up a nice big paper. It's usually multidisciplinary. Like I talked about, that friend of mine, they work with a lawyer, they work with an architect, right, the engineer. They work with they have a patient that they take with them to have them try things. And he often finds things that they don't. And I'll just give you an example. This isn't a test question. My friend that's the PT, she had measured the light switch, and don't quote me on the number, it's 44 inches it's supposed to be at, something like that. And the patient in the wheelchair came by and he was like, it's not the right height, and he knew, and it was off by a half an inch, literally. And he could feel the difference. So a lot of times the team of people that does this consultation does include somebody that might have the, need the accommodation as well. All right. So what are you gonna do at the residence? So we're talking about those three different locations, right? We gotta look at the external things, like, so there's sidewalks, garages, entryways. Internally, we wanna look at like the doorways. That's probably the number one issue is doorways. And then stairs, making sure there's space for them to make turns, and the floor surfaces are gonna be another big thing to look at. So in the community, we wanna make sure they have public transportation is available and easy for them to access, right? We wanna make sure your sidewalks and your curbs, have cutouts, so it's easier for them and you don't have to do a curb transfer all the time, which we all love doing. It's so fun. You're gonna love it today too. So, but anyway, you wanna make sure that you, address curb cutouts instead of making them do curb transfers, right? We wanna make sure they can shop conveniently, and access the, public buildings, okay? Can any of y'all think of that, like at Walmart or Target, like, is there any accommodation that you've seen?
I always wondered why is there a drive-through at pharmacy? I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. So sometimes they'll have certain like baskets maybe, to help the patient, like that's in a wheelchair, right? Or they have the powered chairs, right? So that they make it convenient for them as well. So those are some of the accommodations like the bigger box stores are doing, right? All right.
Like a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Say some, like, there's a place that's not like following ADA, like people can't get through. Like I used to work in the mall, there's a lot of stores where, you know, wheelchairs just won't fit here, so they fit out all their stock. What would like somebody with a disability do if that was not accommodating to them? Besides not shop there, like, is there somewhere that they can go to say, hey, this place is not doing anything?
Yes, so you can report them. I'm smiling because my best friend is a lawyer, and he is actually representing a case right now, and that exact thing happened. A gentleman in a wheelchair went to an apartment, and they had handicap accessible apartments, but they didn't show it to him. And so they showed him the standard apartment, did not comply with the ADA requirements. And so they are now being sued by that gentleman because he could not live there because it was not in compliance. He couldn't access the apartment, basically. He couldn't access the refrigerator. There was multiple problems, right? So you can actually sue over it. So that's why I was not. I mean, you can go, so you can report him to like our state people, but you can also literally sue over it too. So it's very serious. So this gentleman is suing a lot. A lot. So anyway. Okay, basic assessment of the community, right? We're gonna look at their transport, the curb cutouts. I've already said all these. So now we're gonna move on to the housing. Sorry, I didn't flip my screen. Okay. Basic assessment of the workplace. Did I talk about these? Okay, no, I didn't. It's the same as basically your house too, right? It's gonna be, you gotta look at the parking lot, you gotta look at outside things, but you gotta also look inside the facility and see if there's accommodations that need to be made. Right, so the doorways are gonna be a huge one. Doorways and hallways are huge for people because a lot of times the doors are not wide enough for handicap accessible, okay? So remember that for your inside. Your floor surfaces, like I already talked about, the bathrooms are huge. Outside, you're talking about your parking spot and whether you got curbs that are hindering them from being able to enter, okay? And that front door sometimes is a problem too, but usually it's the parking spots, and it's the curb to get in, okay? I'll just tell you as a side note, I want y'all to start thinking about and looking at where the handicap spot is for where the ramp is to get into the facility. It is usually very far away. But you got this nice upfront handicap spot, which is great if the person is ambulating and you know the person maybe has that handicap sticker for their new total knee or congestive heart failure and they can walk in and you want it close. But for the patient that's in a wheelchair, the ramp to get in the facility might be at the very other end. And that happens more times than you realize, okay? So you gotta look at all those things. So in that instance, as long as there is an entry the patient can use, you don't have to make another accommodation, right? Because they have a way to get in, but you have to have at least one ramp somewhere for them to be able to enter. Okay. All right. For housing, residents in which a person with a disability is able to function independently is our goal, right? So sometimes we have actually universal designs, and we're about to talk about these, that will help with configuring. So most places now are building with these numbers in mind so that new builds meet the ADA requirement and you don't have to later go back and make adjustments, okay? So, sidewalk width, we want it to be 36 inches. I would tell you that if I was gonna know something, because you're gonna need to know this in your career, you wanna know what the door width should be. It should be 32 inches minimum, okay? What door is usually not accessible for patients in their own home is actually usually the bathroom door. Because they used to be 28 inches, used to be the standard for a bathroom door. So we really are missing it a lot of times. The patient can get all the way to the bathroom and then they can't get in the bathroom, right? So we gotta give them like bedside commode used, or they have to be able to make that short distance walk from the door. Okay, so doorway width, you need to know, needs to be 32 inches. The sidewalk width, you should know as well, that 36 inches. Again, hallways, we want them to be 32 inches, again, minimum, so that the wheelchair can fit down. All right? And then ramps. I don't know how much you guys know about ramps, but there's a rise and a run to ramps, right? We want, for every inch that goes vertical, we want 12 inches, so 1 foot of a distance, right? So the rise is 1 inch, you need the distance to be, that they're going up, to be 12 inches, all right? So why that matters is once you get a slope that's harder than that, it's gonna be very hard for them to independently do it and do it safely. Okay, so the rise to run is a 1 to 12. Okay, 1 inch, 1 foot. What's that?
The ATI in Easley that I worked at has a ramp, but it is like almost a 45-degree angle. It is a super hard ramp.
Yeah, it's super hard, and
So a lot of times we have like wheelchair patients, we'll like see them park and we're like, we gotta go get them. Not come up that ramp.
yep. It's pretty tough. So next semester, I know y'all are already thinking about next semester. You get to be in a wheelchair for my class for at least 24 hours. It might be longer. And then you get to write a paper for me on all your experiences. And it is eye-opening.
This semester?
Next semester. That's next semester. I know y'all are all thinking about next semester because you got this semester. What? Yes. Isn't that gonna be fun? It's very eye-opening. It's very eye-opening.
You gotta like take it home with us.
There are little things that you don't, and I'm diverting, but I'll get back on course. How am I doing on time? Okay, I'm doing it. It's a very good experience because you get to learn a lot, right? You get to see what your house really looks like and those things. So it's a good experience, but you're gonna get to see firsthand like what Kat talked about. There might be a ramp, but the rise to run of it is so steep that you can't manage it, okay? So it's a good experience.
Our house is already wheelchair accessible because my house is completely wheelchair accessible with a ramp, our doorway, we're all multi-tuned, all the light switches are lowered. My aunt who babysits my kids is in a wheelchair, so my entire house is done.
Perfect. All right, we're gonna keep going here so we can get you guys out on time, right? But, what do we need to do with your house to make it accessible, especially the kitchen? The sink height is really important, so make sure that, you know your sink height, right here, 32 to 34 inches, that's important to know. We want them to be able to use the sink every day, right? We want to make sure that counter height is correct as well. So that's 30 to 34 inches, and then a radius to turn. So a lot of times the room might not be set up in a way that they can turn around in, so we want to give them that radius to be able to turn, okay? So it's important that we know that you need about 5 feet to make that turn, all right? So those galley kitchens that are straight on are not handicap accessible for us, all right? For the bathroom, toilet height. All right, so if they're using a bedside commode, 16 inches or less from the floor is okay for the bedside commode. 18 inches is for the traditional toilet. All right, so a little different. This has to do with transfers, and that's why. Okay. Also, you want a sink height again is important. That 34 inches, and then where your grab bars are, 24 to 30 inches. I'm not joking, you guys. I bet 50% of my home health patients, I have to tell them where to put the grab bars. Okay, so just you got to memorize that 24 to 30 inches. That's where it is ideal for them. Okay. As far as in the bedroom, the bed height is again, it's probably the number one thing that you're going to use when you're working. That 18 to 22 inches from the floor Firmer surfaces are always easier for our transfers. We're gonna talk about transfers next week, and you'll understand that a little bit more then. You want adequate space to get the wheelchair up to it as well. But the real thing is the bed height. 18 to 22 inches is ideal. You will be shocked at how many patients have their bed high. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's Southern ladies or what. I'm not joking you. These little step stools that they'll put in front of their beds, and they step up on them, and then they step into their bed. And I'm like, what are we doing? So 18 to 22 inches is ideal. That's what we need. Okay. So for garage, you want the garage height to be 10 foot minimum, so that when it's raised, that a van would be able to enter it, right? And then 8 foot for a wheelchair lift, okay? So again, housing that is accessible, a resident is considered to be accessible if the person with a disability is able to function independently. So that's the main goal of the ADA and making the home, the house, the resident accessible for them. We want them to be able to do these tasks independently. And then features for clients with hearing deficits or loss. So remember, there's telephones that will have texting. It goes across the front of it. I don't know if any of y'all have seen it. A couple of the houses I've been in, they'll have it, and it's like literally reading it. So the person is talking on the other end, and it has got a text message coming across the screen the whole time. So there's those. There's visual signals as well, and then closed caption, right? Those would be things that will help people with hearing loss. For people with vision issues, we want tactile and sensory things to help them. We want warning strips, right? Audible cues as well. And then appropriate lighting is probably the number one thing. Make sure you got appropriate lighting. So, and that's why our curb cutouts and those things are usually painted yellow or red. Yes, ma'am.
Is the painted yellow or red, is that what the orange red is?
Yep. So they specifically do that to help people that have vision issues. Okay. And we're done, and I'm out on time, even when I digressed. All right. Eat lunch and you come see me from lab. So just an FYI, I heard that there's a hurricane coming. Oh my gosh.
Between 3 and 4.
I feel like when I was in school, we would I didn't hear any of this stuff. I mean, I don't know. Okay, anyway, show my age. I am going to try really hard to get our lab group to get outside today and tomorrow. So tomorrow, if the rain holds for us, I will look at the forecast at the last minute, and I might make a split decision that we go out to the lab part first and then come in and do the lecture later. Okay, just a FYI. So just tomorrow, give me a little grace. I'm trying to work around the weather, Mother Nature, what she wants to do. So, okay, just
Will you email us?
you know what? I literally probably would make a decision like 15 minutes before, and I'll look at the radar and see. And so, meet me up here.
Okay.
And that's a great thing. Meet me up here if you're in tomorrow's lab group, and we might just leave our stuff here and go down and go do our outside stuff first if we can get the weather to cooperate. It's gonna be, I think, more fun if you get to do it outside. Maybe it's just me. Today we start up here for sure because the weather's holding. I don't think we're supposed to have any thunderstorms till later, so we're gonna start up here first. Okay. All right.
We have an extra 20 minutes. I'm okay. Wash hands, introduce yourself, name, date of birth. We don't do diagnosis today. We asked her. No diagnosis. Consent, yes. I always pair that one with name and date of birth. That sounds like prepared. that's your lecture. Like if there's ever.
How long
I'm not worried about taking that's not what we're doing.
You know, I syrup in my coffee this morning.
Like, the only well, but if I don't write them down, if I don't know them to write them down, I'm not gonna know the end of it.
Mine is delicious. And you can have this. I did. This is literally what I would wear to work.
But again, okay,
You want to talk about freezing, Allison? Be glad you didn't verbally party after rehab.
that doesn't count.
Because it was like 66
She
degrees.
just wants to see that we can say it. But since
Well,
I
they
can
had
all
to
them write on my paper, I'm good. I don't have to like. I mean, I do have to verbally say them. But if I verbally say it and I mess it up, if I can't quite remember, I'm good.
Let me see.
As long
Where'd
as
you
it's
go?
on my paper. So I'm stressing about my paper because it's not on my paper, and then I go in there and I mess it up. Well, now I got two messed up.
Oh, there you are.
She's hiding behind me.
I was like, she's sitting back there. No, you don't.